Hello everyone and welcome to another video. My name is Becky, otherwise known as Mystical Essence. And if you're into tarot, if you are into astrology, or if you are into the metaphysical in general, then you are in the right place. If you are new to my channel, welcome. If you are not new to my channel, then welcome back. Again, if tarot, astrology, or the metaphysical is your thing, feel free to give this channel a subscribe, give this video a thumbs up if you like it. So in this video today, we're going to discuss shadow work. And I'm going to share with you a simple technique, an astrological technique that you can use to discover part of your own shadow through looking at your birth chart. Okay. Please understand that some of the techniques I share were techniques that were shared with me through meditation, through my guides. Okay. So if you research this and this doesn't come up, this would be why. Okay. So if this is a technique that does not resonate with you, that is fine. You don't have to take this information. I'm not saying it's gospel. I am just sharing what has come through to me so that, you know, if it does resonate with somebody out there, maybe it'll help you all too. So in this video, we're going to talk about shadow work, what shadow work is, the general concepts of it, and I'm going to share with you a technique that was shared with me on how to discover your own shadow, or a way to discover your shadows using your birth chart. Okay. If you guys do want more information on shadow work, I will leave a link to an Etsy posting that I have that is a 5-page PDF that I have written out all about shadow work. It discusses some of the things we will discuss in this video, such as what shadow work is, why it's important. I also get into in that PDF what can occur when we don't do shadow work on a regular basis, and that's why it's kind of important. I also cover various techniques aside from astrology. I do cover astrology techniques as well, but other techniques aside from astrology that you can use and utilize, tools and techniques that you can use and utilize in order to discover your various shadows, because there's usually more than one. No human ever just has one shadow. Okay, there's lots of things tucked away in our shadow. That closet is full of lots of different things. And I also share techniques in that PDF as well on how to heal and integrate the shadow as well. So if that's something you're interested in and you want more information on that, check that PDF out. The link will be in the description of this video. So on that note, we're going to jump into this and get started. So what is shadow work? What is the shadow? Before we get into shadow work, we need to understand what the hell the shadow is. So the shadow is a concept that was brought to mainstream attention through a psychiatrist named Carl Jung. Okay. And essentially the shadow is all the aspects of ourselves that we neglect, that we hide away, that we repress. So it is like that proverbial closet. You know, when people say you've got skeletons in your closet, meaning there's things about yourself that you hide away, that you want nobody to know about, the things about yourself that you don't even want to acknowledge, that you just tuck away into that closet, close the door and walk away. That is your shadow, okay? That is your shadow in a nutshell, in a summary. So the shadow is created through repressing things about ourselves. Okay, we hide things, we repress things, we tuck things away about ourselves that we either don't like about ourselves, we're taught not to like, or we're taught is not appropriate. Okay, the shadow is created, it is often created as a child. Okay, but not all of our shadows stem from childhood. So our shadow always always exists. From the time we're born to the time we die, it is always going to exist. It is a part of us. However, a lot of children are born with a shadow integrated. We don't learn to separate aspects of ourselves until we start to develop in the world, I guess you could say. And that often starts early in childhood, right? But at birth, we're not born, the shadow is born integrated. And as we live life, we separate aspects of ourselves, which essentially disconnects us from our shadow. Okay, so a shadow kind of becomes separate from us. So that's how the shadow is created. It's created at childhood when we're told that certain parts of us, certain aspects of us are not appropriate or not good. So we essentially start to repress those things about us. And we start to hide those things from people so that we can be more socially acceptable to people in the world around us. And this continues through life, right? And we continue to feed that shadow all the way through our lifetimes. That's why I said our shadow will exist from the moment we're born till the moment we die, okay? It doesn't fade. We are constantly integrating things, but as we're constantly integrating things from the shadow, we are constantly throwing other things back into it as well. A good example of a shadow that isn't created from childhood, okay, would be work. You know, you know how people say they have their work personality and their home personality? Why? Because at work we are told to dress a certain way, act a certain way, look a certain way, present ourselves in a certain way, right? So the aspects of ourselves that do not fit in with that ideal or what we're supposed to be like at work, we tend to repress. We tend to not show, okay? And that creates a shadow. We tuck it away, we lock it away, we ignore it, we neglect it, we repress it. So again, we can throw things into our shadow in our adult lives too. It is not just as a child. I think that's something that a lot of people misunderstand. So that's how the shadow is created. It is created through us taking parts of ourselves that we don't deem appropriate or we don't like or society doesn't deem appropriate and talking it away so that we can become more accepted by society, so that we can become more accepted by our peers, by our family members, by the world and society at large. So what is shadow work? You hear this term a lot. A lot lately. This seems to be a buzz term going around in the community. Shadow work is the work of digging into and understanding the shadow. So essentially we excavate the shadow, so to speak. So everything that we have buried, right, or shoved in that closet, we pull out and we look at. And we acknowledge, and as we look at this, we want this, the essence of looking at it is to heal it and to eventually reintegrate it. So shadow work is the process of diving into the shadow, of looking at what is in the shadow, looking at what caused it to be there, why we repressed it in the first place, why we threw it in there in the first place, healing from that, and then reintegrating it back into our essence, right? And this is important because our shadow is an aspect of ourselves. So if you look at it in terms of light and dark, right? Or even two halves of a whole. If you look at the shadow as one half of us and our actual light body or physical body, whatever, as the other half of us, right? If we cut ourselves off from our shadow, then we essentially walk around with half of ourselves missing, right? We aren't complete and whole within ourselves without integrating the shadow aspects. And again, this is a constant lifetime process because there's still things even as adults, even when we're conscious of the shadow, that we still inadvertently throw into the shadow, okay? So it's important too, because what we throw into the shadow often gets thrown into the subconscious. Okay, it becomes an unconscious part of ourselves. So I can equate the shadow. Another analogy I use is sometimes like when you dig a hole and you start throwing things into the hole and then you bury it and then you walk away from it, right? Well, the more you put into that hole, or the deeper that hole is going to go, you know, the more, how am I going to word this? Okay. Maybe a hole wasn't the best analogy, but you guys get what I mean, right? So say you throw something on the ground. Maybe this is a better analogy. Food rotting into the ground, right? It eventually goes deeper, 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 deeper into the soil as it rots and it breaks down, right? Same with the shadow. We may throw something into the shadow and it will sit there on the surface for a while. But the more years that we leave it in the shadow, the deeper it goes and it sinks down into our unconscious. And then it becomes an unconscious thing. And what happens is when we don't pay attention to the shadow, when we don't work on reintegrating this, it expresses itself in negative ways. Okay? It expresses itself in ways that aren't necessarily positive to get attention. It's like I want to say it's like a neglected child. If you've ever seen a child that is not getting the attention they want, they will act out. Why? Because they want attention. Whether that behavior is good or bad, they don't care. What kind of attention they get, they don't care, right? All that they care about is that they get attention. That's very much what the shadow's like. Okay, so if you neglect your shadow, it's going to react in ways and come up in unconscious reactions. You're going to be triggered by things that you may not understand, and you're going to react in negative ways to things because that's the only way that it knows how to be expressed. So the shadow work is important because it prevents that from happening, and it helps us to feel more complete and whole. And we're not walking around with aspects of ourselves that are kind of detached from us. So next I want to talk about, whoops, we went backwards here. The next I want to talk about finding the shadow within your birth chart. So I'm going to share a really simple technique that was shared with me through my meditations on how to find your shadow, or part of your shadow, one aspect of your shadow. Because like I said, there's many things that you've thrown into your shadow, okay? So this is just one technique. I'm going to show you the easiest technique that my guides gave to me, because I was meditating on this. I'm like, give me the simplest technique that I can give to people to show them how to find their shadow. And this is what they gave me. So in order to do this, I'm going to flip over to a astrology chart, and we're going to jump into this. So give me a second. So here is an example chart that I created. This isn't anybody specific. It's just random data that I entered in to generate a chart, okay? So let's say that this was somebody's birth chart. So the way that my guides explained to me to share with you guys and how to find your shadow was to look at the sun. They were like, think about it. The sun, you need the sun to create, you need a light source to create a shadow, right? And the shadow is always opposite the light source. Example, when you're outside on a sunny day, your shadow is always opposite where the sun is. Okay, so the sun, if it's to your left, you have a shadow to your right. If the sun is in front of you, your shadow is behind you. If the sun is behind you, your shadow is in front of you. If the sun is above you, you generally don't have a shadow because the sun is shining directly on you, right? The shadows always show up opposite the light source, even in photos, right? When you take a photo of yourself, the shadows that appear on your body are always opposite the light source. The light source in your chart, in your birth chart, is the sun. That is our main light source, Okay, there's 2 light sources. But in this case, they wanted me to focus on the sun because the sun is the easiest to explain. Okay. Now, if you look at the sun, okay, this is a glyph for the sun. That's our light source. Now, our shadow is going to be opposite our light source. So if we have the sun here in Capricorn, right, our shadow is going to be opposite that. So what is opposite Capricorn? The opposite sign of Capricorn is Cancer in the wheel, right? And you can see in this chart, if I make it small enough, that the sun is here and the sign directly opposite it is Capricorn, or is Cancer, sorry. So the shadow is Cancer. So when you look up Cancer traits and qualities, think about that when you're thinking about things that you repress, or even things that may come up when you're triggered. Okay? So Cancer is all about feelings. It's all about emotional security, feeling at home, feeling secure, expressing your feelings, expressing your emotions, showing your emotions, right? Cancer, when Cancer is our shadow, we may repress our emotions. We may hide our emotions. We may hide our security. We may hide and repress our sense of security. We may repress our sense of home. We may repress our emotions, our feelings, our nurturing ability, right? Cancers are really good at emotionally nurturing people. It's the mother, right? So think about that for a minute. Right? Do you repress your mothering instincts? Do you repress your emotions? Do you repress anything that has to do with Cancer? Are those things about yourself that you kind of tuck away into the shadows? Okay? So that's how you're going to know. And again, that's one aspect. Now, the other way that you can look at this is look up negative traits of Cancer. So, negative traits of Cancer, or shadow traits of Cancers, they can be moody, they can be insecure, they can be really overly emotional, they can be smothering and clingy, right? Are these things that come out and expressed when your shadow is triggered? Do you tend to, these could be signs even that your shadow is being triggered, right? When you're dealing with insecurities, that could be a sign that your shadow is being triggered. When you're moody and overly emotional, it comes out of nowhere, that could be signs that your shadow is being triggered. Your shadow could come out as insecurities. Your shadow could come out as moodiness. Your shadow could come out as clinginess, right? Remember how I said the shadow, when it isn't paid attention to, becomes like a little child that starts to act up? Exactly that, right? Because it wants to, so it becomes insecure, becomes clingy, starts grabbing onto people because it doesn't want to lose them, starts getting really moody and emotional, you know, because those emotions are repressed for so long, they just bubble up, bubble up, bubble up until they explode. And you become really emotional and moody, right? So that's something to look at. Now, something else they just brought up to my attention is there are 2 types of people. So if you go, I did do a video on sect in astrology and what that means. I will leave the link to that video in the description below too. But essentially in astrology, there's 2 different types of people. People who are born during the night and people who are born during the day. So people have different rulers. If you were born during the day, your main light source is the sun. So always, you can look at the sun even if you were born at night and look and see if those traits connect to you. But if you were born at night and you find that the sun traits don't connect to you, you might want to do the same thing with the moon and just look at where your moon placement is in your chart, right? And then look at the sign across from that. So in this case, it is Gemini, right? This person was born through the day at 8:55 a.m. So they are a daytime chart. However, you know, if this was a person born at night, you know, they might consider looking at the moon. And again, the Gemini has to do with communication, thinking and communication. So when we have Gemini stuck into the shadow, right? Maybe you repress your thoughts. Maybe you don't communicate with things, right? Or people very well. You tend to not express your thoughts, to repress your thoughts, to throw your thoughts into the closet, so to speak, and walk away from them, right? You repress that thoughtful, communicative part of yourself, and you don't necessarily express it the way that you want to. Okay? Gemini also has to do with thinking, communication, cleverness, wittiness, adaptability. All of these things may be things that you kind of tuck away, that you repress, okay? Now, Gemini, when it is the shadow traits of Gemini, is anxiety, is overthinking things. Geminis get really, really anxious. They they get scatterbrained. They can't necessarily think straight, right? Their minds are all over the place. Their anxiety goes through the roof. All of these things come up. So when you're researching this, look up shadow traits too. So not just traits of Gemini, but look up shadow traits as well to see. You'd be amazed that maybe the shadow traits are things that come up when your shadow needs to be seen, right? Or maybe negative ways that your shadow expresses itself. Okay, so that's something you really want to pay attention to. So I'm going to show you guys how to search this. So when you go into Google, if you type in personality traits, qualities and traits, we're going to use Cancer. Oops. Cancer. So this is how you can research this. Type in qualities and traits of Cancer. You can pull up images. There'll be all sorts of images as well. So here we have emotional, caring, intuitive, sexy, introverted, magnetic, mysterious, moody, domestic, warm, funny, subtle, friendly, warrior, impatient, sentimental, loving, sensitive. So we have a few shadow traits here with moody, warrior, right? You can also look up shadow traits. Directly, you can type in shadow traits of Cancer into your Google search and it'll come up with all sorts of them. So do you repress your emotional side? Do you repress your caring side? Do you repress your intuition? Do you repress your warm and fuzzy side, your friendly side, your patient side, right? All of these things are these things you repress. And when you repress them, what happens? Do you end up moody? Do you end up worrying from them? Do you end up blocking yourself off or cutting yourself off from people? Do you end up clinging to people? Do you end up having your insecurities getting the best of you and being insecure about things? Okay, you can do the same with, let's look up Gemini. Oops, when I can spell Gemini, right? So, traits of Gemini. Expressive, lively, adaptable, humorous, playful, sociable, clever, curious, whimsical, independent, brainy, flexible, charming. Are all of these things that you repress? Do you repress the playful side of you? Do you repress the sociable side of you? Do you repress the adaptable side of you? Do you hide all these things away? These are the shadow sides: so scattered, moody, shallow, inquisitive, opportunistic, selfish, fragile, inconsistent, changeable. Do any of these things show up when your shadow is triggered? Do you tend to be very scatterbrained? Do you tend to be very inconsistent? Right? All of these things might come up from a negative aspect of your shadow. So that is that. I'm going to pull up another chart for you guys, and we're going to look at that chart as well, just to give you one more example. So let me pull up another chart. Is it this chart? Yes. Okay. So here is another chart, and this is a chart done without a birth time. So you do not need to know, this is another reason they wanted me to do this one in specific, you do not need to know your birth time to do this, okay? And this is why they had me use the sun, I think, because you can look at the moon too. So like I said, if you find that the sun doesn't resonate with you, look at the moon as well. Because in astrology, those are the two light sources. Those are what we call luminaries, meaning light source. Those are the two light sources in your chart. So if you don't resonate with one, you might resonate with the other, okay? Which means if you resonate more with a lunar light source, then maybe you were born at night. If you resonate more with a solar light source, then maybe you were born during the day, okay? But that's that. So in this chart, we have the sun in Leo, and directly across from Leo, if we go directly across, we have the sign of Aquarius. So Aquarius is the shadow in this case. Okay, so what does Aquarius, what are qualities and things of Aquarius? Aquarius can be aloof. They can be very ingenious. They're like that mad scientist. They can be very unpredictable. They're very unique. They're very intellectual. They're very smart and intelligent, but they see the world in a different way, right? They have different thoughts, unique intelligence. In fact, the water bearer in itself, the symbol and glyph for the sign of Aquarius, the water that water bearer is pouring out represents knowledge, wisdom, and intuition. They are giving the world intuition, which is our knowledge and our wisdom, our own inner guidance, right? He's pouring that out for the world so that we can tap into our own inner knowledge and our own wisdom. So when you think about that, are these things that you repress? Are these things that you hide away? Do you hide away things that make you unique? Who you are, your own quirkiness, your own uniqueness, your own intelligence, your own... Do you hide away the things you know? Okay, your own viewpoints on things. Are these things that you repress? Are these things you throw into the shadow? Okay, now if you look at the crazy side, the shadow side of Aquarius, if you look up shadow traits of Aquarius, they can be very aloof, meaning not necessarily here sometimes. They can be very detached. Aquariuses are notorious for detaching themselves from shit. So again, when your shadow comes out, that could be a sign that you're dealing with your shadow when you just automatically detach from things and you can't connect to things, right? So that's something to be cautious about and to pay attention to. What are the shadow traits of Aquarius? Because these could be traits that, you know, come out with your shadow when your shadow isn't being worked with or utilized properly. Okay. So yeah, if we look at the moon placement in this, we have the moon over here in Taurus, and then, or sorry, not Taurus, it's in Capricorn. Why did I say Taurus? Taurus is down there. But we have the moon over here in Capricorn, and then directly opposite that is Cancer. So again, Cancer qualities, which we just went over in the last one, it could be your shadow trait as well, depending on whether you're a lunar person or a solar person, right? For instance, I was born at night on a full moon, so I would probably look to my shadow being opposite my moon. which is my sun, which is really funny because, you know, looking at what sign is opposite my moon. Now, if you have any planets, you can also look at those. Those might be a little more trickier as far as qualities and traits. The reason I stuck to signs is because signs in astrology give us quality and traits, okay? They are the personality of the planets, so to speak. So for instance, we have like the sun is the planet that rules Leo. Leo is what gives the sun its personality, right? So when we look at the qualities and traits of Leo, we automatically know the personality of the sun. Okay, so looking at the planets, I wouldn't worry if you're a beginner of looking at the planets, because that's going to get a little bit confusing. The more familiar you get with astrology, then you can look at planets for more shadow parts and aspects of yourself. But for a beginner, I would just stick with the signs, because the signs are going to be a lot more easier to research and understand. Okay, so just stick with the signs for now. If you're a beginner, again, if you're not a beginner and you want to take this to a whole other level, you can look at the planets that are in there too. For example, there's Jupiter. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, of generosity, of giving, of unconditional love and unconditional acceptance and spirituality, and all these things. Are those also things that you repress? Are those also things you hide, right? And when Jupiter gets in a negative state, you know, what are ways Jupiter expresses themselves negatively? Because those might be things that come out when your shadow is trying to be seen, when your shadow is not being worked with and not being, those could be things that come out. Those could be things that appear. So that is that. Let me just go. Yeah. So on that note, I think I'm going to end this video, but I hope that this was helpful for you guys to understand. Again, if you're interested in more in-depth information, I will link put the link to my Etsy listing for the more in-depth PDF that goes through different techniques and different ways to discover your shadow aside from using astrology. There are some other astrology ways in that, some other astrological techniques that I've been shown and I've used over the years, as well as other techniques that I've used as well, and in that PDF. So if you're interested in that and more information on shadow work and different techniques you can use to identify your shadow and integrate and heal your shadow, again, I'll leave the link to that in the description below. Please give this video a thumbs up, comment, or subscribe if you liked this video and you want to see more. And I will see you guys all in the next video. Bye for now, guys.